Hi, this video is the explanation for the reading comprehension practice exercise 2 passage 4. I'll be putting up the entire passage on the screen first. You can pause the video here and read it. Then I will explain the passage as required, and then we will go through the 4 questions which are asked in this particular passage. Let's take a look at the very first thing, that is the passage itself. The passage says, every day we put our trust in computing technology, in the financial networks that drive the global economy, the aircraft control systems that guide thousands of flights safely to their destination, the computers that store our documents at work and at home. Yet, most people still don't count on computing the way they rely on electricity or telephone. So it starts with how computing technology is now used in a lot of things. The entire world's economy, the global economy, sensitive things like aircraft control systems, right? And for work and at home, storing of documents, everything is done through computing technology. But still, the way people take electricity or telephone systems for granted, people don't trust computing the same way, right? We accept electricity and telephone connections and rely on them totally, but computing is still something which is taken with a grain of salt. Individuals and businesses alike are concerned about privacy, security, and availability of the data, about upgrading their hardware, about how new applications might affect their system. And until these concerns are addressed, computing potential to enrich our daily lives will not be fully realized. The second part of this passage says, what is the reason that we don't totally rely on computing? It says computing comes with its own set of problems like privacy, security, whether data will be easily available, how if new applications come, will the systems still work, how will it affect the system, the need to upgrade hardware as technology changes. And finally, the last line of the first passage says that till these concerns that people have are taken care of, people will not use computing as much as it can actually help them. Second paragraph. Right now, we are only scratching the surface of what computing technology can do. It means we are just using the bare minimum. It has a potential to do a lot more, but we are not using it to its full potential. Already, networks of smart connected devices make it possible for us to do business, communicate, learn, and be entertained using everything from fully featured PCs to smart handheld devices. Right? It tells what is it that connected devices, connections through networks, through the internet, it says that it can do business, it can help us learn, it can keep us fully entertained, and it is not restricted to only computers but even handheld devices, that is mobile phones. And the years ahead, a combination of inexpensive microchips and smart software will weave computing into almost every part of our lives. It says computing has still a lot of improvement to be done. Right now, if we think that it is expensive, then as technology improves, the computer hardware will become cheap and we will be able to use it for everything that we do. The advance of computing technology has in many ways tracked the growth of electric power more than a century ago. The way electricity was invented about a century ago and started becoming a part of our daily life, similarly, computing technology is now growing. Manufacturing companies were among the first to use electricity, mostly to improve their productivity. But in the home, it remained as a novel luxury. It says when electricity was first invented, it was only in production companies which actually manufactured goods, that it was used. In homes, it was not very commonly used. Today we see electricity as something which is a basic need, but in those times it was seen as something which only the rich could afford, or something which is a luxury, not necessarily a necessity. Still talking about electricity, it says many people were reluctant, they were not very sure, they were hesitating to use the new electrical appliances, unsure of their safety and reliability. So when electricity was new, people were not sure if they could safely use it. By 1930s, however, technological advances, industry safety initiatives, and gradual public acceptance led to a rapid increase in electricity use in many countries. The technology was still not trustworthy, but it was safe and reliable enough. So as and when people started understanding it, when more standards came which made it very safe, then people started accepting it, that it is okay to use it, it is safe, it is reliable. And today the developed world takes electricity for granted. We don't even think of it as a luxury. We think electricity is something which we must have, just like we have air and water. Electricity is something that we feel is a necessity. We cannot do without it. For computers to be taken for granted, they must always be available wherever and whenever people need them. They must reliably protect personal information from misuse, give people control over how their data is used, and they must be unfailingly secure. So now the author says that just like people slowly and steadily started understanding that electricity is safe and reliable, computers will need to make sure that they are accessed whenever people want them. There should be a lot of security for the data that people put in it, and it must have control in the hands of the people. We call this concept trustworthy computing. Making trustworthy computing a reality is both an immediate challenge and a long term research goal. So, making computers safe so that people trust them is something which needs to be done immediately, and also you need to keep researching about it. Computing technology is far more advanced and in vastly different ways than it was in the mid 20th century. Yet, the way we build computers and the way we largely design software and services around those computers hasn't really changed. So now in the end, the author says that technology in computers has increased in so many different ways. The way it was in the mid 1900s and the way it is now is very different. But still, the way we design our software and services, we haven't really improved and made the best use of the available technology. This is what the passage is. If needed, you can pause the video here. You can read the passage once again to understand what the author is trying to say. Let us take a look at the questions asked in the passage. The very first question. I hope you are reading the passage once again to understand it. The first question: the examples of computing technology that are put to our everyday use do not include. Now, the common mistake is you might not read the word not and you might try to search for something which is in the passage. Right? It says which of these do not include, which of these examples are not included in the passage. Now, if you take a look at the first one, it says financial networks that drive the local economy. Now, you might think that you have actually read this before, that in the passage it clearly said financial networks drive the economy. But if you are paying close attention, then you would have understood that it talks about the financial network that drives the global economy. The passage does not talk about local economy, it talks about global economy. So that means financial networks that drive the local economy is definitely not mentioned in the passage. And because I do not have all of the above option, I actually don't need to read further. But still, if you do, the very same line does talk about aircraft control systems guiding flights and computers storing documents at work at home. So there's a minor thing, but one which is very important. Financial networks that drive the global economy is mentioned and not local. So A has to be your answer. Now this says, what can possibly follow the last line of the passage? Now for this type of question, you need to read and understand the last paragraph very carefully. The first sentence mentions that making trustworthy computing a reality is both a challenge and a long-term research goal. And the last sentence says that yet the way we build computers, so on and so forth, hasn't really changed. Now option A, if you read carefully and understand grammatically, is an incomplete statement. The changes that need to be made to make trustworthy computing a reality is or was or something, right? The statement is incomplete. So A is not my answer. You may ask a question to yourself, what changes, right? So A is incorrect. If the situation hasn't really changed, the author apologizes for the state of affairs and the research activities that was a goal and hasn't been achieved, right? It says that the last line says that things haven't really changed. So apologies for the state of affairs and details of research activities that are on. Now, C, legal hurdles is nothing which is following anything which is already given in the passage. And because B is quite possible, so my answer in this case definitely has to be B. The writer draws an analogy between public acceptance of computer technology and what very clearly the entire second paragraph talks about how computing technology today is following the same trends that electric power was when it was first introduced. People did not trust it. It was first used in manufacturing, and then everybody started taking it for granted, right? So obviously C is the answer in this case. And the author uses the word weave in the passage to imply what? Now, to weave something into the fabric is to integrate something, right? To blend things. So, weaving technology with our lives is the smooth blending of technology with our lives. It has nothing to do with inexpensive microchips and software or the marvel of easy software. Weaving something into our daily lives means making something a part of our daily lives. So, A is the answer in this particular example. So I hope this passage was easy to understand and all 4 questions could very easily be solved. All you need to do is read the passage carefully. Maybe the first question of this passage would have been a bit tricky, but the remaining pretty easy and the answer will be very obvious. So definitely a passage where you can score at least 3 marks out of 4.